Hey guys, what is up and welcome to a new Tesla update video. So today, as per usual, let's go over Tesla stock. Let's go over what happened today, what we can expect moving into next week and potentially the rest of this month. And yeah, all that good stuff. If you enjoy, ladies and gentlemen, please don't forget to hit that like button. This is not financial advice. I am not a financial advisor, but if you do enjoy my technical analysis, my thoughts on the charts, updates, etc. Well, again, I do share my thoughts with my members every single day as the market is trading throughout the actual trading day. So that link is down below for the YouTube membership. The first tier for just $3 US a month, you get access to the Tesla tier, which includes Tesla and constant updates again throughout the day, options flow, technical analysis, etc. Tier 2 for $5 a month gives you access to that plus NVDA as well if you're interested in NVIDIA stock. And then tier 3 for $7 a month gives you access to everything there plus non-Tesla, non-NVIDIA stocks that I talk about as well, like Apple recently, Shopify, Pepsi, Nike, GameStop actually just today. But yeah, nonetheless, definitely check it out. Link is below if you're interested. Love to have you there. We're over 600 members now, so that's awesome. I'd love to see that stuff. That's, I do appreciate the support. Don't get me wrong. But jumping into it, Tesla closing the day, we'll just say, we'll give it the 5%, almost 5% on the day, closing just shy of $300 per share. Finally getting that much, waited for breakout, I guess you can say, right? Tesla finally getting that much needed breakout. And, we've been talking about this, right? I've mentioned how I do expect Tesla to make its way higher. And I don't think it's done. I actually don't think it's done. In fact, you can argue this is actually just beginning, in my opinion. Obviously, we'll talk about the risks. Nothing is perfect. It's not guaranteed going to go up. It's not like, 100% guys, it's going, I think it is. And I think there's a much higher chance it is than not. But obviously everything has a risk, right? Naturally. So let's talk about both aspects. Let's start off with the bullish perspective first. So what happened? Well, we obviously know that, Tesla was in this little bit of a bull flag here, ended up getting that breakout. It looks something like this actually, right? Got that breakout. We talked about all this, right? You guys know the drill. And we also mentioned how on the 1 hour chart, it was getting that breakout as well. Ended up getting kind of like that retest to close the day off yesterday, and then ended up getting a substantial follow through with a lot of options being loaded across the boat. So what is next, right? Well, so where do I even start, honestly? So number one, the MACD. Let's start with the daily show. The MACD, bullish. RSI, bullish. Like there's nothing on the MACD that's telling me that the stock is bearish, right? So the way I look at this is this, right? Because the MACD is bullish, RSI is bullish, like everything is bullish. We broke above 295 and held the rest of the day, didn't collapse below it so far. So as long as these maintain as is, and as long as Tesla ideally maintains 293 to 295, for instance, which was that level that we kind of, constantly got rejected at over here, which honestly, we can even bring it up something like this now to make it a little bit more concrete. But essentially, as long as it maintains this sort of, $3-ish range, 292, 295, it's like around there somewhere, right? Mid to maybe slightly lower end of the 290s. I think it's looking pretty damn solid still, right? Now, granted, we might get a day or two of maybe some sideways consolidation because, on the daily, we are a little bit on the more overextended side relative to the market bias, right? We can't just only go up from here and just leave it way behind us. That's usually not how it works unless it just happens to be a substantial squeeze, which, it's possible, kind of like the opposite of what happened here. Technically possible, but, you shouldn't rely on this. This is an exception to the rule, not the rule. So what do we expect on Tesla? Well, like I said, because we broke all these levels, because we set a fresh high, that to me tells me those things, right? These are bullish. And on top of that, that also means that this low that we had back here, this sort of swing low we had right here at pretty much like 271 roughly, that becomes a very strong low for the bulls. So in other words, if Tesla happens to lose, let's say we do lose 293 to 295 roughly, right? Let's say we do go back down below it, technically a possibility. As long as Tesla doesn't drop this low that we just set a few days ago right here, that to me is still bullish. So even if Tesla comes back under, it would definitely lose the very aggressive bullish momentum that it's technically still in as long as it remains above 293, 295, which I'll talk about where it can go soon. But this is like, if things falter a little bit, right? Maybe a little less bullish, maybe the market pulls back, whatever the case may be. Maybe Trump posts something over the weekend. You never know in this market. It's good to be ready for as many scenarios as possible ultimately. But, if we lose 293, 295, then that, would mean that we get a small little pullback, right? But this small pullback to me will be perfectly normal. I don't think it'll be bearish at all, right? If you even take the fibs and I say this happens to be the high, we have the fibs all the way down here. 293 is the 0.382 fib, which is the first level we can come back to maybe even as early as tomorrow or Monday or Tuesday. Then we have 289, and then we have the 285 levels of the 618. Worst case scenario, in my opinion, is about 277. That to me is like worst case scenario, right? If the market really decides to pull back and Tesla naturally succumbs to it, that to me is the worst case scenario while still overall maintaining a bullish thesis because, again, that's just how the structure works, right? We broke this high over here. We made a fresh new high, which then, whenever a fresh new high is made like this, I start looking back and thinking, where was the recent swing low that was made prior to this high being established, or the move that created this high was established? Well, that recent swing low is right around here, right? 270, 271, 272, around there, right? That was the recent swing low. So it's a strong bullish low. That's the bullish territory now. Same way that the bears had the kind of, we're defending it up here, but it kind of flipped-ish, right? So again, same idea. Again, if we see any pullback that's deeper than I currently expect, which it's possible, you never know, then that would be an opportunity. I think it'll go higher. But as of right now, I do expect the bullish momentum to persist, mainly because we actually held above this level all day, this on the 1 hour time frame, which I'd like to see that, right? So the ideal scenario, if we really maintain the bullish outlook and we don't falter and we continue seemingly, being strong and bullish, which I think is a more likely outcome personally, is maybe one more day of consolidation potentially, or maybe one small spike, then make our way back down, get a nice actual retest of this zone, and then and then we make our way higher, essentially more or less waiting for this market bias on the 1 hour time frame to pretty much catch up to the stock, if that makes sense, right? And then I think it'll catch up. The stock will kind of do its thing, whatever, come back down a little bit. This catches up. It meets in somewhere around this 293.5 level, and then from there we bounce even higher. And I personally expect, as long as we continue holding this 293 to 295-ish range and essentially wait for this to catch up, I believe at least one more high, probably just one more high though, at least for now, is in the cards, right? And that to me will be essentially a high. I'm not exactly sure how high just yet, I'll be completely honest, but a new high, whether that's just maybe 310 or best case scenario, all the way back up closer to the 320s, around 320, right? That's an important level, 320. If I zoom out, you can see this was the level right over here that ended up acting as a resistance, right? This kind of 325-ish range. That to me is like the short-term best case scenario. But I also, even if we don't go that high, I still think even higher than the high we put today is still more likely than not, personally speaking. Again, maybe 310, maybe just slightly above 310, somewhere around there, which was that kind of resistance point you can see right around here, right? A little bit higher. But why do I expect that, right? Well, because again, we held this range, we didn't falter, we didn't lose it, which is good. As long as that maintains, this is my thesis. And on top of that, what I like to look at for Tesla stock, at least, to really determine, we're probably close to a top. There's a chance that we're topping probably relatively soon, if not already, right? What I like to look at for Tesla stock is, number one, obviously you can just look at the RSI and the 1 hour time frame being, well, overbought, right? It was overbought here, we pretty much topped. It was overbought here, we pretty much topped, right? That's number one. But what I like to look, especially on Tesla stock, especially once Tesla, starts doing Tesla things like it is right now, at least it's trying to, it seems like, I like to look for divergences, right? So like I said, divergences. So for instance, same back all the way over here. It had that massive, massive rally, came down, pretty much made equal highs, if not actually higher highs. If you actually, did it when the candle was above this range before it sold off, you can see here. If you look closely, you can see it. I'll zoom in on it actually. How about that? I'll zoom in on it. Look at this, right? Check it out, right? I'll just show you an example of what I'm looking for moving forward. So you can see technically this candle made a higher high. So back when the candle was actually up here before it sold off back and closed down here, it was still making a bearish divergence. It was still making a lower high on the RSI. That's roughly what I look for, right? And you can see once that happened, we pretty much sold off, right? Same idea on the next time that happened, right? Which was not that long ago, right? We had that another massive push up. We set this high over here. RSI very much overbought, sold off a little bit. So, could get a small little sell off closer to 293/5, potentially, Monday. Wait for the EMA to, or the market bias to catch up, and then we push higher. And at the very least, make equal highs, ideally higher highs. And that same idea, like it did here, makes, in this case, technically it's a higher high because the candle closed higher than this candle. But you can see, as this candle closed higher than this candle, again, and I talked about this when it actually happened. We're just revisiting it just to re-illustrate a point. Very obvious bearish divergence, right? Very obvious bearish divergence, right? Lower high on the RSI, arguably a higher high on the actual stock. And then you can see we didn't really sell off necessarily. And we obviously came down from like 290 all the way to 275. It's a 15-point sell off. It's, it's decent, but it also means the fact that, we didn't really go anywhere for quite some time, right? Quite some time. So that's the thing with these divergences. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to sell off. That is an option, but it also just means that you're probably not going to be going up as much anymore. So that's, again, just to really illustrate the point, I'm just really trying to explain what I'm looking for is kind of what I'm looking for here. So the way this could look, for instance, is, we go sideways, so maybe a small push up, come back down, retest the zone, market bias catches up, go up higher, somewhere around this vicinity, around here-ish. And then I want to see the RSI do something like this, right? And then we'll start setting up that bearish divergence, right? Where the stock makes a higher high, or at the very least equal highs, ideally a higher high, while the RSI a lower high. Once I see those kind of things, that to me tells me that there is buyer exhaustion. We most likely start looking for topping signals. even though that's technically one of them. But at the very least, it'll tell me that, yeah, we could go a little bit higher, but you're really starting to play with thin ice over here from the bullish perspective. It's probably not going to go that much higher, at least for the short term, for the next maybe week or so, right? We're probably going to cool off, at the very least go sideways, or even more so cool off to the downside, back down, and kind of reset the stock, if it makes sense, right? So anyways, that's what I'll be looking for in the coming days. Now, the last thing, a few things I want to talk about before I end off this video is the weekly is the first one. Obviously, the weekly candle is officially closed. You can see a nice bullish close, right? I see no problems with this weekly candle. MACD is looking pretty damn spicy. I see no problems here. I don't see a problem here whatsoever. But remember when I talked about, and this was probably 3 to maybe even 4 weeks ago when we were still around here. Remember I talked about how we're so extended from the market bias the exact same way that we were here. People doubted it, right? People absolutely doubted it. People didn't believe that this would happen. But I kept mentioning that, we're probably playing out the exact same pattern that we did up here in the topping sense, as opposed to now being a bottoming in sense, where we, after the topping candle here or the bottoming candle here, there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This one happened a little bit quicker, but nonetheless, about 6 weeks of sideways consolidation before reversion to the mean, Pretty much the exact same formation happened. And now we're pretty damn close to it, which is why I wouldn't be surprised to see one more little bit of a higher high, closer to a potentially as high as 320. That to me will be an actual full reversion to the mean, pretty much complete. And then the stock from the weekly perspective will be reset to a neutral stance, at least relative to reversion sense, right? I still think the stock will from there be bullish. But the point is the fact that now it's not ridiculously oversold essentially. In fact, on the daily, it will be pretty overbought, overbought at that point, because if we do something like this and make our way higher up here, we'll be very far away from that daily market bias, you can see, which will be probably all the way down to the 270s at that point on the daily, right? And that to me is another reason why I would also expect that, plus the bearish divergence that most likely will set up if we make our way higher, that we're probably getting exhausted. The buyers are getting exhausted. It's time to cool off. Those are the signs I look for. Hopefully that makes sense. That was a lot of information, but I still want to talk about 2 more things. One of them being options flow, but the main thing I also want to talk about is something else that I haven't talked about in a while that I figured I'd bring out, because it is a pretty nice way of looking at things as well, which is the exponential moving averages. We haven't talked about these in a while, but you can see on the daily time frame, these exponential moving averages are pretty important. It's the 9, the 20, or sorry, I think I have the 8 actually, the 8 or the 9. I have the 8. The 8 is the green one, the red one is the 21, and the white one you can see here is the 50 EMAs, right? They're all EMAs. So Tesla has been in a downtrend, evidently so, for quite some time, as the EMAs were all bearishly crossed. But especially back here, you can see once the EMAs cross back to bullish, which is kind of what we're getting pretty close to, right? We had that, the first crossover here, which is the first time it happened, and that's, created that bullish momentum. But what else is happening? And, we can see we kind of consolidated it into back to the EMAs, perfectly normal, like I've been mentioning. And on top of that, they're on the verge of both crossing over the 50. To me, if both EMAs are crossed over the 50, the 8 and the 21 are both above the white line, the 50, that to me tells me that the daily time frame and the kind of more zoomed out approach, if we were to look at, weeks from now, is bullish. Simply put, is bullish. Another example is kind of like GameStop, for instance. Again, I'm just using GameStop because it's probably the best example I can think of right now. It's a little bit of a messier chart, but take a look at it, right? This whole time, GameStop crossed bearish over here. And this whole time, despite the rallies, everything has been sold off. Every rally was sold off. And then look what happened. If I zoom in right over here to the left, my point is the fact that Tesla's getting close to this as well, right? GameStop, same idea, right? Finally pushed up, massive push up, came right back into the EMAs, consolidated right at them. They all started crossing to the bullish side, and then it exploded upwards. I'm not saying Tesla will explode upwards like this, obviously, right? You never know for sure. But the point is the fact that GameStop is, considered it's a free trade, I guess. It's doing very similar aspects right now. Very similar. Then it crossed bearish. It was bearish for quite some time, like many months. Now it's essentially doing the same thing, right? And Tesla's kind of in that same boat, roughly, where you can see same idea, right? Anytime it crosses bearish, it starts rallying. Then it crosses, even here it was actually still technically crossed bullish, which is fine. I meant to say bullish here, not bearish. And same idea here, right? Hopefully that makes sense. The point I'm just trying to make is the fact that we're damn close for another full bullish crossover of all the exponential moving averages above the 50, which is a good sign from the bullish perspective, which tells me that at that point, any dips from here on out, so if we do something like this and then all the way back down like this or something like, I view them as opportunities, because the overall thesis on the daily chart has been flipped to bullish, assuming we get these full crossovers, which at this rate we should, as long as Tesla doesn't just completely collapse within the next day or two, we should get that full crossover, which would be a phenomenal sign for the bulls. But again, remember, if we get that higher high, bearish divergence, and even on the EMAs, we'll be pretty extended away from them. So don't get too excited too quickly just yet. You know, some consolidation, maybe Monday and or Tuesdays, maybe expected, but I think we'll ramp up after that again, most likely higher. And then I think that's where we'll start to top out. But yeah, nonetheless, that's all I got for you. Options flow on Tesla stock, very, very bullish throughout the day. Obviously some bearishness came in, but for the most part, definitely more bullish than bearish. And then of course, we have confirmed options flow on Tesla, only about 15 million. But yeah, that's all I got for you. Thanks so much for watching. See you on Monday. Peace.